Hello, and welcome to another segment of the Coatesville Area Public Library's Oral History Project. I'm Kirk Witmer, and with me today is a lifelong resident of our community here. With me today is Doug Lambert Senior, who is 79 years young. Good morning, Doug. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Good morning. 79 years is okay, but not young.
Tell us what life was like when you were a youngster. It's been some time, and I'm sure there's been a lot of changes, but we're interested in finding out what it was like for you as a young fellow.
Life for me was very unusual. If my father was to walk in here right now, I would not know him. Three of my brothers, we were abandoned at about 3 years old, 4 years old. But it's unusual, but that doesn't mean you stop. You keep right on going. I came through very hard times. Mother died in 1933, very young age, only 33. That was her age, 33.
And you would have been how old?
I would have been about 13, 14, about 14. And back during those days, work was very scarce. You didn't get paid much when you did work. I don't know whether you know it or not, but from 10th Avenue to about 13th, that was called Drumpelia. During that day, that's where Coatesville's rich people lived, and then they moved up Westchester Road and so forth later. We had a bus service at that time that ran from Coatesville, Sadsbury, and Modena. And you could ride from Hayti, where I lived, to 13th Avenue for 10 cents. My mother did that, worked for the wealthy people, and they paid you every day. And I can see her right now coming home with 2 bags of groceries for a very small amount of money that day. Groceries were real cheap, and labor was exceptionally cheap at that time. But that's the best you could do.
And the groceries were paid with her earnings for that particular day.
For that particular day.
And that's a situation where very little cash actually came into the home. It usually came in the form of groceries or other goods or merchandise.
That is right. With the exception of you always would raise a pig, a few chickens, or something of that sort. We even raised rabbits. Yes.
I suspect there was probably a vegetable garden involved too?
Absolutely. Had to have a garden. The garden was survival. That was a little extra fresh food.
Doug, what was education like for you as a youngster?
Well, education, we had a one-room school at first.
Where was that located?
And right at Valley Township Municipal Building. The one-room school was across from it. I never went there. I went to the one that had 2 rooms. 1 to 4, grades 1 to 4 was 1 room. Grades 5 to 8 was the 2nd room. And during that time, we were taught we must learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. We were very obedient to the teachers, had to be, or if they told our mother, it wouldn't be very good after that. So it was really, really, really good. My education was good. But then, when we left the 8th grade, we had to walk from Hayti, Valley Township, to the James Adams School, which was about 800 Merchant Street for 1 year. we walked right past the Benner School. It was a Coatesville High School at that time, because they didn't have a 9th grade or some reason. But anyhow, then on our 10th grade, then I went to Coatesville High School for the 10th, 11th, and 12th. Graduated in 1938, and just had our 60th reunion. Very fortunate because I was able to be there, because we have lost 111 out of our class.
Since graduation?
Since graduation.
How about social life for teenagers back then?
Social life for teenagers back there, we had social life. We played baseball, roamed around the schoolyard and the roads that weren't paved, run and have fun. But we didn't have recreation centers or anything of that sort. But we didn't stay out late at night. We were supposed to be in at a certain time, and you better be there.
What was that time?
Well, it used to, at first, school time was 9 o'clock. Then, as we got a little older, it was 10 o'clock. Very seldom 12 o'clock. After we got down to high school, then it was a little more, but 12 o'clock was the limit. And you must be in by 12.
Yes. Doug, having walked through the streets of Coatesville as a child, and as you drive through downtown Coatesville today, what differences are you aware of?
Well, there's a tremendous difference. It's still the same town. It's quite a few empty stores. Back when we used to walk through town, most of the stores were occupied by people that lived right in the city or outside the city, Westchester Road or Drumpelia or in those areas. And today, when you drive down, it's more congested. It's just a different town altogether. Different town altogether. But it's still a good town. Coatesville's my town, and it's getting better all the time. And I want anybody to know that Coatesville's my town.
Good for you. What was your very first job? You must have done some odd things as a teenager.
My very first job was after my mother died in '33. One summer, I worked on a farm, 50 cents a day. Then my next job around here, I helped one of my uncles in a body shop. That's where I learned body shop work and repairing. Then my next job, after I got out of school, I worked on the WPA, helping build Kings Highway at Eagle, Pennsylvania. Then I worked on
Let's talk about that for a while. What did they have you doing? You were just a teenager at the time?
I was very young, and at that time, no experience in road building. We didn't have equipment that they have today. We had hammers and very old trucks. Most of them had old trucks. When they brought the rock in to make the base, you would have to break the rock with a sledgehammer. And you better have some experience, because if you didn't, blood would be running down your legs because the stones would fly and hit you. And of course, I was always very obedient and expected older people, which I do today, and I'm old. But one old fella said to me, Doug, he said, that stone that you've been hitting on, don't hit it that way. He showed me where the grain of a stone is. Hit it on the grain and it flies right open. That's what I did. I worked on the Pennsylvania Railroad, and that was quite interesting because I only weighed 97 pounds and I couldn't carry those big jacks. So I had a fellow there named Miller Reeves. He carried my jack and his too. And then I couldn't do the work there. So I went up to my boss, Mr. Rainier, and I told him that I'd like to continue to work, but the work was a little too heavy for me. I couldn't do 24 spans a day. And he gave me a job water boy. So from there on, I was all right. I had a good job. Then I worked in a body shop after I got out of school for a little period of time. And then I went to work in Lucan Steel in 1940.
Doing what?
Well, I went in to get on their railroad, which had little dinkies that carried the steel around. But to get there, first you had to work on the railroad, which I had no problem with because I had experience on the Pennsylvania Railroad.
You're an old railroader from way back. Huh?
That's right. So after 2 months, I got a job on dinkies, and used to work night and day. And of course, at that time, the old fellas would make the young fellas work all weekends, and they would work the beginning of the week. So I stayed there, and they called me for the service, and I went down to the service to be examined, I guess, to go to the Army, and I was turned down for health reasons. After that, I came back and I asked Mr. George Irvin to give me a better job because it's working night, days, snow, rain, and shine outside. I wanted to be inside. So he couldn't find me a job that I wanted. He sent me 2 or 3 places, but those guys, Nelson Buell was one of them, Bob Bunning was one of them. They kept putting me off. I'm going to give you this job, I'm going to give you this job.
What types of jobs were they?
The jobs they would give me, like in sandblasting. And that was the one that really told me that I had to leave Lucan. One night, one of the hoses got loose. There's 2 men in a little cubicle that sandblast plates. And one night, Fred Pope hose got away from him and burned a hole in the leg. So as soon as it healed, I went over and I told Mr. Irvin that I had to leave. And I needed my money because I was going to open up a body shop in South First Avenue. And he said he couldn't give me my money right then because if you get fired, he would pay me right away. But when you quit, you couldn't get paid. And I asked him a simple question. You wouldn't want me to hit you right now. The cops come up here and because all this commotion, and then I get paid. So I'll make you a better deal. I said, tomorrow morning, I'll be back. You have my money. And if you don't have it, I know where you live on Oak Street, and I'll be up to your house to stay overnight. So that next day when I went back, a lady by name of Ann Rosenberg had my money in an envelope. Started out the door. He wanted to know, you're opening up a body shop, and what time? I said, 7 o'clock. And he was my first customer until he died.
And how much money was in that envelope? Can you recall?
I think, I'm not sure, but I think it was something like $70. Because when I left there in 42, I worked 13 days and could not make $100 with my bees. Now, bees are an incentive for you to do more work.
Okay.
So, and I had a fellow tell me one time that that's not true, and I told him to come to the Chrysler place, which we owned for 23 years, and I still have pay stubs, and I would show him. He came the next day, and it was $94 for 13 days.
Amazing. So you opened up a body shop, and business was good?
Oh, well, business is good if you work hard.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
So how did...
I opened a body shop in 42. In 46, I bought a bus company to haul workers from Coatesville to Claymont. because the bus I could repair right at the shop on South First Avenue. And of course that didn't last very long because the Interstate Commerce Commission at that time, Mr. Lehman was my insurance man, and he tried every source he could. After 90 days, I couldn't get any insurance because of the Interstate Commerce Commission for blacks. You couldn't get no insurance.
When you mentioned Claymont, I think viewers should know you're talking about Claymont, Delaware.
Claymont, Delaware.
And workers were going there. It was a steel mill there.
And a lot of the fellows here worked there, and we would go 3 times a day. We'd take them for the morning shift, afternoon shift, and the evening shift. And that was real nice. After that, in '48, I moved to Strode Avenue, right around the corner from the Coatesville Hospital. And I stayed there 40 years, although in 1968, I bought a property, 2949 East Lincoln Highway, from Ted Robinson and Dave Groy. And that's where I had used cars and a little body work there. In 1970, I bought Lambert Chrysler Plymouth, who was Wiggins and Sheridan Chrysler Plymouth. And I named that Lambert Chrysler Plymouth. I didn't buy it, I bought it from them. And we stayed there 23 years. 23 years, sold Chryslers and Plymouths. A lot of customers in town. And in '73, we sold the 2949 property. And my son, Tom, who graduated from Morgan State College in Baltimore, he came with me and owned 48% of the stock.
Let's talk about transportation and cars in particular. Over the years that you were selling cars, what were the major changes that you saw, and what were the things that customers were most excited about being able to finally get in a car?
Over the years, I got to say that there for a while, Chrysler Corporation did not build a good car. Now, I'm not only telling you that, I told Lee Iacocca that. Lee Iacocca was, I would call him a personal friend after I met him. In 1979, when he came to Chrysler, Chrysler then had begun to be in a very bad financial condition. But going back to the question that you asked me, most customers like a car for 2 or 3 reasons: price, service that they get, and the person, if they know them, they look for a little bit more, which we always try to do, give a little bit more, and then style in a car. But getting back to '79, Lee Iacocca promised the government if he would lend them a tremendous amount of money. I think it was $5 billion. I don't remember now, 5 or 5.5 billion. And what his plans were. He called all the dealers into Detroit and gave us a talk of what he'd like to do. After he met with the government and got their answer, he called all the dealers, finally got the loan. There was quite a controversy. My congressman right here in Lancaster County, Bob Walker, he knows me well today because he was one of the ones that voted against it. I talked to him personally how many men would be out of work. They lend money to overseas. They give money, you might as well say, some of it over there they'll never get back.
Right.
And here we are here, a dealer. Of course, I was the only black dealer out of the whole group at that time. There was one prior to me, but he had went out of business. And I talked to Bob Walker at length. I talked to his I guess you call it his aide, at length, but couldn't convince him. So every time he comes to Coatesville at a Rotary visit or wherever he's at, he knows me because I get up and talk with him. And he admits today that he wished he had have done it, but back there he didn't want to help. So Lee Iacocca began to really give us a better car and give us better styles. He went after the younger people, a car to attract young people, and he did a tremendous job, tremendous job.
Well, Doug, Mr. Iacocca must have had a hard time convincing the government to forward that loan to him. How do you think he went about doing that?
Well, he went about it several ways. He gave him an extensive plan of what he planned to do and how he planned to do it. And within the Congress, it was a tremendous fight. They claimed that this was the first time that they had ever gave a business, automobile business, or for any business they claimed at that time, you might call it a shot in the arm. They felt, as some of the fellows felt, as if they didn't need Chrysler cars. General Motors and Ford would be enough. And he convinced them, or convinced the majority of them, that they did need a third car. And then they approved the money with certain conditions. And that's where he had to make them promises. Number one of the promises was we would benefit black dealers. And this is a must, because they didn't have any, hardly. The ones that they had was private capital dealers, which we were.
Now, I'm going to have to ask you to explain that. Private capital.
Private capital means that it's our money and our bank. General Motors and Ford, and even some Chrysler dealers, white dealers, were MID dealers. That means that they're owned by Chrysler. Chrysler lends them the money for their dealership. And when they pay 51% of the money back, then they get a more interest in their company. In other words, we had a dealer right here in Coatesville, Chevrolet dealer, Ray Klein. That's the way he was bought in. But they didn't bring any black dealers in that way at all, General Motors, Ford, nor Chrysler.
No, they were all private dealers.
He had to promise them that he was going to bring more. But we were private capital, which means it's our money and the bank, and we trust in the Lord. So we went from there, and Chrysler gave them a time limit that they were going to pay the loan off. They paid it off 2 years early. In making a better car, people buying our car, and a good price car. Right.
Now, when you say a better car, are we talking construction techniques?
Construction techniques. I have to admit it, we had cars that rattles, water leaks, they just was not built properly. And so therefore, Lee Iacocca, each factory had a different formula to go by. They must give a quality car. It must be better tested. And they really did a good job. Really did a good job. Really did a good job.
So your dealership was off and running, and eventually you decided to retire. But I know that you've been very active in certain organizations in our community as well. Tell us about some of those.
Well, I'll start. I've been active in quite a few. I was on Valley Township Planning Commission many years. Then
over what period of time, Doug?
that was back in the 60s. That was back in the 60s.
Can you recall some of the issues that the Planning Commission had to deal with at that time?
Well, back at that time, we were just getting ready to plan better roads, better services for the community, and it was quite a job because we had had one supervisor who'd been there for quite a while, and it kind of got a little stagnant. But we had to get the township just in a little better condition. And I must say today that our township is really rolling. We have a good chairman, Grover Krohn, and it's really rolling. Then in the late 60s, I was appointed to the Board of Managers at the Coatesville Hospital by a fine gentleman, Albert Eastburn. He was the president. And I didn't want to take that job, but he convinced me that it was needed, and I stayed there for 12 years.
How did he go about convincing you?
Well, I had to give up some of my time at my body shop. I was always used to working 12, 14 hours a day. And so I decided maybe it was time to give up some of the time and just help the community with whatever I had. And so I decided I would take it. And I stayed there 12 years. I enjoyed it.
What made it so enjoyable?
Well, to see the happenings that goes on in a hospital, wages at that time, help at that time, many things, and to help correct some of them. Because back then in the 60s, you have to begin to make progress. There wasn't too much progress made in the 40s. I can understand why, and there wasn't too much in the 50s, a little more. Like in the 40s, when I left Lucan's, we were just getting a union. So it's a lot of problems there. So I enjoyed it. Never missed a meeting, and always shook hands with everybody when it came to the meeting. I had one gentleman, I'll never forget him, a fine man, Mr. Watson, and he just couldn't accept a black being on that board for a while. Never before. But he was in Lucan's too. And one day I was called out of a meeting, and I excused myself. And when I came back, I told him it was Lucan's calling me about one of their trucks. We do a lot of work for them, and they need it so that they can get it on the road the next morning.
Certainly.
And when he found out that I worked for the same company he worked for, that was a different man. And I used to kid him about it all the time, But I enjoyed the job. It was very good, very good. Then in '70, a gentleman by the name of Bill Badiger, William Badiger, he was the president of the school board right here. They convinced me to get into that. So I was a member of the school, and he appointed me. The interesting thing in an appointment is that you have to be okayed by the other members. And I had one member that I was on the board that I was raised with right there in Haytie. Of course, his father had a pool room and so forth. Ed Lawrence. He wouldn't even vote for me. So what I did, Bob Watterson, when I first started my business, I was looking for his vote. And he cast his vote when he came back off of vacation. And I'll never forget, I told him, I said, Bob, I'm certainly glad you voted for me, because I didn't want to tell him that you didn't like colored people.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. What is your impression of the changes that you have seen regarding race relations over the years? I know that in years gone by, there was a very marked separation or split between races and where people could live and couldn't, etc. So what are the changes that you've noticed, and why do you think they have come about?
Well, there's several changes in race relations, and I have to say that they are better, although there's a lot of improvement. But I got to say that they are better, because from what I saw in my age, where I came from, I got to say they're better. They're tremendously better. But it could be more. But race relations is something that's hard to change. I have had one customer particularly at the Chrysler place. He went to another dealership and bought a car. And I knew him and went to high school with him. And I felt that I had a responsibility, although I shouldn't have done it, but I had to do it, just to find out why, if him and I went to school together and we played soccer together, why couldn't you buy a car from me? Now, if you didn't buy it, come get a price from me. That's all I asked. And the answer that I got from him still sticks today, that it's hard when you're brought up, you've never saw a black dealer before, you've never heard of one around this area, automatically don't come to your mind. He had all kinds of excuses. But when I pinned him right down, because I knew him well, he just admitted that he just couldn't come up to that. Eventually, he bought a car off me. So that was when we were in about 19 years. He came by to bought the next car he bought from me.
19 years later?
19 years later.
You finally came around.
Finally came around. So it's good, but there's a lot of work to be done, but it's a tough situation. It's a tough, race relations is a tough situation. But as far as living now, you'll find that we have been given job opportunities. I could have built on Robin Road. I had friends on Robin Road. I had customers on Robin Road. When they were building their house, I even went through it. I was building mine at the same time. But I chose to build over where there would be no controversy. But then everybody's not like me, you know, they want to live wherever they want to live. And this is what you should do. This is what you should do. And this is what's happening today. Everywhere you go, you'll see black people living everywhere. They're working, they're making money, they're paying their bills, and minding their business, and paying taxes. So it's just the way it is today.
Doug, tell me more about the boards and other of agencies that you've been on. You've mentioned there were many.
I have been on the Brandywine YMCA board. I was on that for about 5 or 6 years. And I must say that I was one of their top fundraisers. They're doing a tremendous job. Although I sometimes sit and think that the real meaning of a YMCA is if you came into town and you didn't have anywhere to stay, you would be able to go to the YMCA and rent a room for a night. I'm hoping that they will not forget that and fill that blank right there. You can do that at the YWCA. My other board was Chrysler. After they had got on their feet, they formed a minority group, and I was the treasurer. And when I left that board, I have to tell you that we had 63 minority dealers in the country. I couldn't leave that out. So that was the promise that was made by ICOCA, and that's what it did. Now, out of the 63, I must say that I saw several more that couldn't cope. They went out of business, even though Chrysler would lend them money under a training program because they didn't want to put in the time. A lot of them didn't want to sacrifice. But there's guys that went into it and did very well, very well, very well.
I'd like to back up 1 second. You talked about your being a top fundraiser on the board of the YMCA. I'd like to know what sorts of efforts it takes to be a top fundraiser.
Well, now go back and say I was one of the top fundraisers.
All right.
The only fellow that beat me back there was Van Sant from Lucan's. Now, what it takes is a tremendous amount of work. I spent a lot of time. I would go to people that I knew they had money just to be a member. And then when you're a member for $125, you get a plaque. Ooh. And convinced them, one after another. And went to different businesses, automobile businesses. One guy told me, he said, "We don't fool with nothing like that." Well, wait a minute. Now, you have children, don't you? Yes. Finally convinced him. So that's how I become one of the, and then up on 322 going to Honeybrook, I hit a lot of people up that way. Kearns Hardware, the company that does the RVs, and along the route, a lot of people. But I convinced them that in the summer, they have a bus that comes up to Honeybrook Way free and brings the children down to swim. They have a lot of children up that way. So this is how you do it. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
But it also shows us that you can sell more than cars, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Doug, you have brought some interesting documents with you today. They tell us of events, some of which that date back into the 1800s, and also events that were occurring back in the 1930s and 1940s. Share that with us, if you would, please.
Today I've brought you an article that Coatesville was founded in 1812, and that the first Coatesville post office was built by a Negro American named Sam Plato. And the next item on the agenda was James Adams, who the James Adams School was named after, was one of the first members of the Coatesville City Council. It also goes on to tell us that Lucan's 206 rolling mill was the largest in the world. One interesting thing is that our Elks home in the East End had just become free from mortgage, and they pledged $1,000 to the new World Memorial and Recreation Center that we were supposed to build in 1945 approximately. And one other item that was real interesting on here is Chester Ruth, who lived in Yap. Him and his brother had many inventions, patents on them too. Self-feeder threshing machine, cinder grader for the road, and some other inventions. And one interesting item is that Sam Thompson in the East End and Robert Hoe, who graduated from Scott and Adams School, they were lieutenants and captain in the Army. So I thought you should have that for information. The second item I brought you was a proposed plan for the community center and World War II Memorial, and this had met most of its goal. And on Thursday, June the 7th, in 1945, at 6:30, they had a big meeting at Scott Field. There's a picture of it and so forth.
But obviously it never happened. Do you have any idea why it didn't?
Well, I've questioned several people. The amount that they raised had hit $50,539, and they just can't explain what happened. So I don't know how you could find out. I haven't been able. I hope somebody would be able to come forward and tell us what happened. The fourth item that I brought you today was the Atkinson Memorial Hospital. Everyone knew Dr. Atkinson. He was a wonderful man. and he was turned down at our Coatesville Hospital in Newlandville on the Hill from being admitted to the medical staff. He could come in as a doctor, but he wanted to come in on the staff. So he refused and went down to 7th Avenue and built his own hospital, and I'm giving you a picture of that. The fifth item that I'm giving you is a picture of the Adams School. I love this school because I had to go there one year, walk past it. Number two, when they were getting rid of segregation, they even changed the name to the F.W. Harris School. Now, F.W. Harris was a wonderful guy. I knowed him well. But that didn't attract the parents of children enough to come over to the James Adams School. So eventually your school board decided that they would sell the school. And I just happened to be going by there one day when the sale was going on. And why I bought it, I don't know, but I did buy it. I'm giving you a picture of it. I have had and still have a proposed plan for 24 apartments in this building. And the HUD, or I guess you call it the Westchester Housing Authority now, they took it from me in '74 by eminent domain, even though I had a plan for 24 apartments in that building. So I wanted to give that to you today. And as I told you, I'm very proud of my fundraising. So I'm bringing you a picture of Jody Smith, who is the director of our YMCA. And I'm being given the Charles Houston Award, which is a high award, a nice plaque. Still hangs in the Y. And I'm so happy because that year I raised over $100,000 for them.
That's wonderful, Doug, just wonderful.
And I also wanted to tell you that Coatesville is still my city, and they're still making improvements, as I said. And the YWCA, as I told you, is doing a tremendous job. I told you about the YMCA. And I also would like to tell you about my family. I have 5 children, and my oldest daughter, Joyce, is a school teacher in New Jersey. My next daughter, Jane, is a school teacher in California. My youngest daughter, Louise, is an executive secretary at Westchester State University. And Tom, as I had mentioned before, he had an interest, 48% of our Chrysler dealership, and he now runs the body shop, which we've been in for 57 years. And my other son, Doug Jr., he has his own place, Lambert Auto Sales, near the airport. I also have 10 grandchildren and 11 great-grandchildren. And I'm proud of my family, proud of my family.
Doug, in closing, I'd like to ask you one more question. As you think back to your early educational experiences and how school was for you compared to being in a school facility such as we have here today, there's obviously many changes. What advice would you give to the youth of our community regarding their educational opportunities?
Well, I hate to ask you to repeat that again, but as you know, I'm an old man. Mm-hmm. And I just say that one more time.
Well, you had experiences that are, in terms of your education, that I'm sure were quite different than the opportunities that are available to students today. And I'd like to know what advice you would give the youth of our community regarding their educational opportunities.
During my day, when I came out of high school, there was no help with the exception of a senatorial scholarship, and very few of those. And to get a senatorial scholarship at that time, your family had to be so-so or somebody, and then they would look out for you. Of course, my family was nobody. We came from scratch. And I wanted to be a doctor, but it was impossible. So I chose the automobile business to make money, and it takes a lot of sacrifice, and that's what I did. In the body shop, we're still in it today. My son Tom runs that. At the Chrysler place, he owned 48% of stock. But for children today, they have all kinds of opportunities. First of all, in the school, they have a counselor. I was just telling one of my grandchildren the other day, have you talked your situation over with the counselor? My understanding was, and is, that a counselor is supposed to help you get any, might be some types of grants, whatever's out there, get it. Now, the children today also have another golden opportunity because their parents have funds. Most of their parents have good jobs. And this way, their parents can pay, and then they can work a little to help. I don't believe in just paying and not putting no responsibility on them. But I forget how many grants somebody told me 2 years ago was out there for children graduating from school. And if their parents looks into that, plus their counselor helps them with it, I think this will be a good idea. Because the reason I say counselors, I had an opportunity, an opportunity, when one of my daughters, who teaches school now for 30 years, graduated from a school, and one of the teachers asked her what she wanted to be, and she wanted to be a school teacher. And Mrs. Catherine Hoffman told her to forget it now, which is bad. Now, she wasn't a counselor, but why would a teacher tell a child this? She's a teacher with 2 diplomas, graduated, and been teaching ever since. But today they have a golden opportunity.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, golden opportunity.
Well, Doug, I want to thank you for being with us today. You've given us some insights from your point of view as to what it was like to come through Coatesville over 79 years. And we appreciate you agreeing to participate in our project here.
Well, I thank you for having me, and I enjoyed it. There's a lot of little things that I might have forgotten, but I've tried to answer fairly each question that you gave me.
Good.
And I wanted you to know that I still work 4 hours a day,
Well, good for you.
and I thank you.
And I thank you.